Welcome to Tech to Tech presented by KYZEN, where we will explore common cleaning questions and answers. Let's get started. I would like to introduce KYZEN's own Jody Saultz.
Thanks, William. Thanks for joining today's Tech to Tech presented by Kaizen. We're going to talk a little bit today about keeping your cleaner in your tank um, and how air knives, ventilation, and nozzle directions affect that fluid that's in the wash tank. So, real quick on air knives, basically, air knives are high velocity of air that is basically applied to the surface of the parts you're cleaning. A lot of customers refer to this as air that squeegees or excretes fluid or contaminations off of a specific product or whatever that may be. Um, but basically, it's just there to remove moisture and any other possible contaminations that could be left on the product when it goes through the system. A lot of these are made out of stainless steel, aluminum, plastic, so avoid corrosion. Don't use anything aftermarket. Do your homework, make sure it's compatible with whatever your fluid that you're putting in your system as well. Best practices on air knife. It's most inline machines have a chemical isolation section along with the dryer section. So if you have a chemical isolation section, it's always best practice to aim those or angle those air knives about 5 degrees toward the load end. And same in the blower section. Some blower sections have multiple air knives, but the angle really is just needed on the first couple air knives just to keep some of that fluid or most of that fluid pushed back into the rinse sections. The more you can get off of there, the better job that your machine is going to do throughout the rest of the dryer section to help dry that product. And then, the rest of the air knives in the system, like I said, they can be perpendicular or straight up and down on the belt. I think the biggest impact that an air knife has is making sure that if you have a machine that's capable of adjusting, is to move that air knife or all of those air knives throughout the whole system about a half inch above your tallest product. So if you're running fixtures, pallets, raw parts, PCBs, whatever you're running, if you know what the tallest product size is, lower those air knives down to a half inch, and you're going to get the best performance out of those. So if you talk about ventilation real quick, properly sized at the blower and at the load end. And what I mean by that is make sure that your exhaust system blower is properly sized for the CFM that you have for the machine. And if it's a dedicated blower for that equipment itself, it's always a good idea to use a variable frequency drive. We'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. And then make sure that you have a smooth surface and that the piping is compatible you with the chemistry that you're running and the temperature as well. And then when you install this exhaust system, always slope that toward the load end. You never want to slope that toward the unload end. Usually a quarter inch per foot is a good area to start at for your exhaust to be sloped toward the load end. And then you want the majority of that draw to be above the wash section. And your supplier will give you specs basically telling you what that CFM draw is for a minimum of each port. And then make sure, if the machine doesn't come with supplied dampeners on the machine, install some dampeners on the top of the machine so you can help optimize that whole system and balance out your flow. Like I said, the net flow of the air should be toward the entrance of the machine. It's just important to keep that, that mist from moving into the rinse section. So make sure that airflow is going toward the load end of the machine, which, like I said before, the supplier's exhaust specs will help you make that happen. Critical pieces for that, like I talked about a little bit, was total CFM draw, and then CFM at each port, static pressure, the ability to adjust the exhaust system. So it's important to have those dampeners, sloping that toward the load end. The VFD, the variable speed drive or variable frequency drive, is very important on a dedicated exhaust system. And make sure there's dampeners on each stack. An independent blower is always recommended for an inline cleaner. If you can keep from tying that to a main trunk exhaust system in factory, you're going to be way better off than if you was to tie that to a main trunk that's running multiple pieces of equipment. And then make sure you mark those dampers when you get those exhaust settings set, those minimums. And then if you add more machines to the existing system, if you don't have a exhaust, you may need to adjust those. That's why it's kind of important to put dampeners on there. And then remember to mark those once again after you reset. And then adding the demister. You're going to have to adjust the exhaust, and you might need more exhaust when you put a demister on the machine as well. And also hang that demister as high as possible to get the best efficiency out of that demister. Excuse me. So managing chemical losses, failure to manage chemical losses and additions, these are going to lead to just flushing, money down the toilet. For instance, when you have chemistry going into the wash tank, exhaust pulls out mostly water and a small percentage of chemistries. Drag out's what's going to pull most of that wash tank solution. And so whether it's chemistry or whatever you're washing off, flux, masking oils, dust, dirt, debris, we basically refer to these as NVRs, non-volatile residues. And as the wash tank uh, washes, that NVR is going to increase. And the reason I talk about this because it's important to set those air knives up so you can keep that NVR or those nasty residues in the wash tank as well. You don't want those basically pulling down um, and being reapplied in the rinse section or the dryer section. This is just a quick example of high mechanical loss. And what I mean by that is you can have the most perfect spray bars or air knives set up in the system, but if your exhaust or your ventilation system has too much CFM draw, um, you can get high chemical loss from excessive exhaust flow. So make sure that you reach that minimum and then adjust accordingly after that to keep from these mechanical losses going up the stack. This diagram just shows misaligned spray bars. So this is another mechanical loss that you could see. If you have spray bars that are out of adjustment or misdirected, these spray nozzles or spray bars could be also spraying into the next zone. And in some cases, if it sprays far enough into the chemiso section, all that fluid's going to go to drain. And I've seen these in some cases that these were so misaligned that they actually sprayed all the way over into the rinse section, which is just another whole problem that you're going to be fighting. So proper nozzle size and air knife alignment is important. Fixturing, baskets, in addition, you want to make sure all these nozzles are not clogged and that they're set correctly. If you look at the picture on the left side, 1 through 6, these are just an example of nozzles that could be clogged. When these get clogged, they're dumping huge amounts of fluids or deflecting improperly at the actual product itself. And in some cases, they may be so clogged that you're not even getting a clean product. So make sure that you get that good fluid delivery system working across the tire assembly, so from front to back. So just real quick, this just talks about there was a study relating to exhaust flow and operating temperatures to stack losses, and it basically found that the largest factor wasn't evaporation of the material, but the high pressure spray. It basically atomizes that fluid, creating a mist or real small droplets, and these are basically pulled out of the process chamber by evacuation rather than evaporation. Kind of like we talked about with the high exhaust. So um, if you look at the demister, these mists are these will be reduced consumption wise. If you use this demister, it'll absolutely help you knock down this mist. And when you install this into your exhaust system, like I said, whether you're running high temperatures or you have misaligned nozzles, this absolutely is going to help. And this demister, like I said earlier, it can save you a ton of chemistry over a year's period, as long as you run that back to your wash section. And just real quick, all machines should have these nozzles and air knives adjusted. We kind of talked about this already. 5 degrees on the air knives. You can look the wash section. Basically, the last spray bar in the wash section, we angled back at 5 degrees. This should just help to keep contain that and deflect fluid that is being delivered to the product at different angles to help keep that fluid pushed back to the wash section. So make sure you look at all these angles. So in conclusion, maintenance has a huge impact on your cleaning process. Nozzle alignment, adjusting product or adjusting those configurable air knives. You have that in the machine. It's very important. And temperature, energies from the pumps and spray nozzles, all these cleaning agents that's being used, they basically react together within the wash process. So optimizing a piece of equipment will absolutely help the wash solution stay in the tank. And like I said, a proper alignment is a must. Proper ventilation is a must. It's very important to check these nozzle alignments and air knife alignments. Sometimes these get moved during maintenance. Sometimes they just move because of the high pressure of the system and the thermal energies that's being given or delivered from those sections. But it's very important to check these weekly, in my opinion, just to make sure that that fluid is staying in the wash tank and they're getting delivered fluid to the product and you're getting quality product at the end of the day. And then, total CFM draw, and don't forget to mark your dampeners. So just real quick, some frequently asked questions. How does the VFD work? Basically, it's tied to the inline machine. So when the inline machine is running auto mode and it shuts down and goes idle when there's no product in it, the VFD basically controls the speed of the exhaust blower, basically slowing it way down as well, so it doesn't have that high CFM draw. So it's not basically sucking those atomized fluids up during idle periods. Second question, are there specs for ventilations? Absolutely. Your equipment manufacturer will be able to give you the specs for not only the total CFM draw for the machine, but they should be able to give you the specs for each port. Some machines, they may have two or three ports on top of them. Very critical to at least reach those minimum CFM draws for the specs on the ventilation. And then does an emitter save on chemistry? Like I said, if you have a properly um, optimized exhaust system and you put a demister in it, you can expect to save about 55 gallons a year in chemistry. And then does nozzle size affect spray bar impact or for chemical loss, chemistry loss? Absolutely. If you have high volume, high flow, low pressure nozzles, they're not going to give off as much atomized fluid as a high pressure um, nozzle that has that's going to atomize. So anytime you can get bigger droplet size nozzles in your machine with high pressure, you're going to be better off because they're going to atomize less, which will keep less from going up the stack. And with that, I will turn it back over to William. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody. Thank you all for watching this Tech to Tech session. If you would like to discuss this topic further or have any questions that were not answered in the session, please contact your local Kaizen regional manager or send an email to tech@kaizen.com. And we will have someone follow up with you as soon as possible. Do you want to have exclusive access to future content sent directly to your inbox, or do you know someone who would benefit from these sessions? If the answer is yes, just go to tech2tech.kaizen.com and fill out the subscription form. And if you like this video, be sure to follow us on our social media platforms for more expert cleaning content.